Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
Discuss, challenge, inform, comment, Viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe.
Giles Brown.
Live comment and discussion with studio guests. Viewpoint.
It is Tuesday the 13th of January. Listen to Viewpoint, Talk Radio Europe's current affairs show with a panel of invited guests discussing the issues of the day with you for the next 2 hours. If you want to get your viewpoint across, if you've got something national, local or international that you want to discuss, well, these are the numbers.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
Looking at a variety of subjects this morning, of course, Iran is front and centre of the news this morning, as is, since we last met, there was the shooting of an American citizen in Minneapolis by ICE. Since we last met, also looking at AI, Grok, Elon Musk, is it a freedom of speech issue or something much more sinister? And anything else you want to throw into the mix, joined this morning by Andres Gallardo and Richard Cow. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Good morning, Andres.
Good morning, Giles. Good morning. Today's Tuesday the 13th, which in Spanish customs is a day of bad luck.
Oh, wonderful.
The saying says, on Tuesday the 13th, don't go sailing or get married. Did you know that, Giles?
Or don't get married at sea.
Well, but yeah, it's not in Spain. It's not Friday the 13th. It's Tuesday the 13th, which is today. So good luck with the program, sir.
Thank you so much, Richard. Good to have you back on the show again as well.
Nice to be back. Thank you. And just on that note, I actually got married on Friday the 13th.
Oh,
in Gretna Green.
Right. Okay.
And it was absolutely fantastic. You know, both my wife and I were living overseas. And we had to go to the conferences, one in Germany, one in Scotland. And the guys in Gretna Green were extremely good. Surprisingly enough, there was not much of a queue of people trying to get married on that day.
Probably UK. Right, let's look at the front pages of today's newspaper, see what the main stories are this morning in the UK. Looking at this morning's papers, they say the following, interesting indeed. The Daily Telegraph says it's uncovered previously unseen documents relating to the new super embassy in China, which they're planning to build in central London. It says they show details of secret rooms, including a concealed chamber, which would sit directly alongside the fibre optic cables that transmit financial data to the City of London. What could possibly go wrong? The Times says sources have confirmed that options are being drawn up for British special forces to storm Russian shadow fleet vessels at sea. The paper says elite soldiers could target hundreds of illegal oil tankers after the government identified a new legal basis for the raids. The Guardian leads with an investigation showing that the NHS in England is overspending on the services for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, by £164 million a year. Research into the cost of the government's drive to reach net zero by 2050 features in several of the papers. The Mail and the Express both carry details of an official report from the free market think tank, the Institute for Economic Affairs, which suggests the figures involved in pursuing the policy will be much higher than the public has been told. Meanwhile, the I paper reports that under-16s in the UK could be banned from social media within months. The paper says the Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, is understood to be open-minded about the restriction amid fears over how much harm social media does to children. So those front pages, top of my pile, the Daily Telegraph, China's embassy's secret threat to the UK. The Financial Times, former Fed chiefs attack emerging market-style investigation of Powell. The Metro, crash, gangs walloped. This is a dawn raid that the Met Police carried out. The I leads with UK under-16s could be banned from social media within months. The Express, tell truth on fantasy cost of net zero push. The Times has a picture of the disturbances in Iran. Iran seeks US talks amid threat of airstrikes. Daily Mail leads on fury over Labour payout to Hermes Guantanamo client. Meanwhile, The Guardian leads on the ADHD story, and also Iran downplays protests as anti-US crowds rally. The Sun, Bin Diesel, fuel pumps to start vanishing within 4 years. The Sun warns that diesel fuel will start vanishing from pumps in the UK. And finally, the Daily Star features another story about ex-MasterChef presenter Greg Wallace. And those, for better or worse, are your headlines on this Tuesday, the 13th of January.
Thank you for listening to Talk Radio Europe.
Viewpoint with Giles Brown.
Always live, always lively, with you until 12 o'clock. I'm running a poll on the Talk Radio Europe official Facebook page, and I'm asking the question, do you think there will be regime change in Iran? At the moment, I've got 100%. Get some votes in, please, on that one, because the people are saying, yes, there will be regime change in Iran. But panel, we have been here before. We were here 4 years ago, with riots in the streets then about the killing of
Mahsa Amini.
Yes, exactly. The protester who was killed for not wearing her headdress correctly. So, Richard, you know the area quite well. What's your take on what's going on here? Because obviously there are reports of over 600 fatalities, and also not only in Tehran, but obviously around the country. What's your view on what's going on over there?
Well, you've got to be very careful on facts and figures that come out, because both sides of the equation will issue their own propaganda and data. So the difficult thing is to sort the wheat from the chaff and say, well, what is actually going on there? Iran has a tradition of the bazaris, the merchants, of being the pulse of the nation. And historically, if food prices, especially bread and rice, if they sort of shot up in price, the people would come out and demonstrate against this. So in Iran, rice and bread is subsidized and protected. Okay, so they can't be abused. And yes, there was a increase of about 40% inflation in Iran. There was an attack on the Iranian rial, which is actually fairly easy to do because it's not really convertible to any other currency. And there's only one or two centers, one being the United Arab Emirates, where a lot of the decisions are made as to the value of the currency. So there was an attack done on the currency. Iran, because of the sanctions, they have, for example, there's around $120 billion that is sanctioned in the West that they can't get hold of. And normally what central banks do is they use whatever reserves they have to try and support the currency. Iran's unable to do that. So they're at the mercy of, and it's not the first time. And we've seen it in other countries. I mean, look at George Soros and the pound. There are attacks on the currency. So the problem was the bazaris. They said, well, okay, look, we got a real issue with our currency. We cannot afford to buy goods. People are not coming into our shops to buy our goods because everything is becoming expensive. This cannot carry on. And they went out, they closed shops, the Grand Bazaar, that's near where the House of the Parliament is and the center of Tehran, and they went and demonstrated peacefully. And the authorities allowed that to go on, not a problem at all. I mean, in general in Iran, you are allowed to demonstrate peacefully, but you can't get out of hand. Then what we saw a couple of days, then the next day they protested, it was relatively peacefully, but then by the third day, we started seeing rioting rather than pure demonstrations. And it reminds me a little bit of the Maidan riots and demonstrations that you had in Kiev, where it suddenly became very violent. And it was seen that, there was a lot of meddling from outside players. So and also what's very, very strange is that in general in Iran, people don't have weapons. They don't carry weapons. Okay, you have the IRGC, you have the army, they all have their weapons, etc. That's okay. But the general public doesn't normally have pistols or rifles. It's very unusual in Iran to have them. And we suddenly see that, there is a lot of shootings going on. We see that there's a lot of burning of cars, of buses, of ambulances, of buildings that have something to do with the government. Okay, you can sort of understand the government side of it, but private houses, cars and buses, etc., ambulances, it all got sort of like a little bit out of hand. And they've also intercepted. Well, also, if you think about it, Mike Pompeo, who used to be the ex-head of the CIA and then Secretary of State. Well, he came out basically praising the demonstrators in Iran or the rioters in Iran and saying that, our people are with you, actually demonstrating as well. And it's not only Mike Pompeo, but others as well have come in and said exactly the same thing. So it is quite clear that there are outside influences trying to egg things on. We also know that Syrian Kurds have been moved to Iraqi Kurdistan area near the border. We know that in Baluchistan on the southeast of Iran, there have also been movements. We also know that, for example, in Albania, there's a big training base for MEK, which was categorized as a terrorist organization.
MEK being?
It's an Iranian group who were anti the Shah of Iran. And then when the Shah of Iran got deposed, they became anti-Ayatollah Khomeini. All right, so they're basically anti-everything other than themselves. But these are the people that the United States have been using as their propagandists. And they also were fighting for Iraq against Iran. And were heavily involved in the gassing of villages in Iran, in the Kurdish areas of Iran. So they are reviled by most Iranian people, the MEK, but they are used as a spokesperson, and a lot of funding is going from the United States into these groups. So we've seen, and it's not that it's guesswork. There is proof that this has been happening. So obviously there's a collective move to try and destabilize Iran as much as possible, potentially as, if you look at the Maidan situation, potentially as a preliminary effort to destabilize country and remove the government.
I mean, could you say that because this is a sort of snowballed with young people getting involved, going onto the streets? I mean, it starts as a small shopkeeper, sort of being a revolt, being unhappy about 48%, I think the inflation is, and then people get involved because they're generally not happy. You've got a very young population who haven't seen anything apart from obviously the government since '79.
Well, no, obviously, if you look at if you look at the Iranian history, the sort of landmark things were like in 1953 with the democratically elected leader Mossadegh. He got kicked out by MI6 and CIA. Kermit Roosevelt was their CIA guy. This is in the time of Eisenhower. Then you look at the Iraq-Iran war, for example. 8 years where United States supported Iraq against Iran. 1 million people died. And that ended in 1988-89. So the other issues that have hit, let's say, the youth of Iran has been, for example, the assassination of General Soleimani, who was a very clever strategist. Was liked by most parties, and he was on his way in. He was actually on official business, invited by Iraq to go and try and help Iraq ease tensions with other countries in the Middle East, and that's when he got assassinated. So the Iranian youth, yes, you're right. They have not lived the terrible 8-year war, and they look at things in a slightly different manner. But as I've said before, if you want to have regime change or a change in the type of government that you have in Iran, all you had to do was lift sanctions. Iranians in general love everything American. That is just weird, but they really love things American and British. I mean, I was very shocked when I first went to Iran that these Iranians were speaking Queen's English. I said, well, good heavens, have you been to England? They said, no, we watch BBC. They all have their satellite dishes and they watch, and they have like a BBC sort of accent. So if they wanted a change in the type of government, the easiest way to do it is to lift the sanctions. The problem is the rate of lifting sanctions, because that would, if you lift the sanctions, you start getting all these Western companies coming in and taking over the small and medium-sized businesses, which will lead to huge unemployment, leads to dissent, people unhappy, and demanding greater change. So the easiest way to change the type of government you have in Iran is lift the sanctions. And it becomes westernized almost overnight. A bit like Spain became democratized after Franco's death. There was some issues, and then it came on the pathway to a democracy.
But do you think that if you lift sanctions, then because there are no opposition parties in Iran at the moment, we have the theocracy?
There are opposition parties. No, it's not. People again mistake, I think, a little bit the way how the Iranian government works. You do have a supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and he is, I've heard him sort of being described as a bit like the Pope. He sort of sets down the philosophy of what's going to go on. And then under him, you have a group of 3 or 4 who really are the strategists behind it. And then you have the parliament, etc., and the special bodies, etc. So the supreme leader, he is like a figurehead more than anything else. He's like the old way that the kings used to be in Britain. They used to have actually a political say, but the parliament really carried the day. So by removing Ayatollah Khamenei, for example, I don't think anything would change. They also, obviously they have succession plans, just in case, because everything that we hear, one of the things that outside forces would like to do is to try and decapitate the leadership. Whether that would change anything, I don't think so. We've already seen that once, that they decapitated, they killed, assassinated a lot of the leadership within Iran. And yes, they stumbled for like a day, but then gradually they got their act together. And I think now, after that warning, they're a bit more prepared.
Andreas, any thought of what is your...
Just listening to Richard, yeah. I almost feel sorry for these dictators in Iran. It makes it sound as if they are a wonderful bunch, when we all know that they are dictators. Repression is how they control power. The people are impoverished in a country with great natural resources. They have been sponsors of terrorism around the region, namely Hamas, Hezbollah in Yemen, etc. And Richard makes it sound as if they are a really good bunch. When there are protests, they end up in violent protests. Because of the response of the forces there. They don't want any dissent. And yes, it is true that everything started this time with discontent of the traders, bazaris as you call them, Richard. But then all that's grown into, sort of dissatisfaction with the lack of freedom, the situation where yes, there are sanctions, but they've been, sort of, now that people realize that the sanctions are the government's to blame for, and that's the real situations from we see here. You hear people. I was listening to an interview from an Iranian a lady who lived in Spain, explaining the situation with a family there, which is terrible. But then I listened to Richard, and I'm almost thinking, oh my God, I feel sorry for these guys. They're so good. Well, they're not, and has to be said.
We can't just answer that. I never said that, these are a good bunch of people. There is a regime. There is a
dictatorial regime. Let's call it by its name.
Well, you can call it dictatorial, but who's the dictator? Ayatollah Khamenei.
Yes.
Who is the dictator? Sorry, they have a parliament. They have elections.
They have a parliament. Franco had a parliament, and you still call Franco, it's not an elected parliament. It's just an appointed parliament. There's a difference between one and the other.
There is an elected parliament. There is an elected parliament. Now, the people coming up to be elected, they go through a vetting process. I agree.
Okay.
All right. But if you
let me just go back to Franco, because there's also a parliament that was also elected.
But if you look at the nature of the parliamentarians, and if you look at the nature of how the government has changed in its policies over the last, say, 15 years, okay, which has given a long enough run, you will see that little by little it is changing. Now, it's very difficult to be an autocratic government, which it is, to being a liberal government. And what you're seeing, and especially now you're starting to see it more and more, it's trying to become more liberal as time goes on. Now, obviously, what's happened is we've seen, for example, in Saudi Arabia under Mohammed bin Salman, a rapid change in the attitude of governance of the people in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. All right? You weren't allowed to drive. You have rock concerts, pop concerts, and all this sort of stuff coming along there. And obviously, Iran has to change. But Iran is under, 47 years of sanctions? Now, I don't know how many countries would have a good time of it, being under so many years of sanctions. It hinders, rather than, and this is the problem that I think is the issue, is that rather than countries trying to help the Iran get out of the mire, they just apply the pressure, and it goes further in the mire to try and, to have the people rise up and get rid of the government. As I said, the easiest way to change the type of government that you have in Iran is by lifting the sanctions.
Because if you have these protests that turn violent, however, from the like we're seeing at the moment, and then you have a crackdown from the authorities, you're back to square one. I mean, reports of 600 dead, etc.
Yeah, look. I mean, whatever number of dead is terrible. I agree 100%. But let's take the riots take a riot in Europe. We saw in Southport, British guys were hurling fragments of benches and this and the other, all at the police, and the police were cowering, just not doing anything. Now, in Spain, for example, or in Germany as well, if rioters started getting very, very nasty, I don't think the Spanish police would take it very kindly, and they would react.
They do.
Right. So the mere fact that when a riot in Iran starts to get violent and shots are being fired at the authorities, they will react. The government has told these rioters, and have told them that, look, if you're out there rioting, we don't mind demonstration, but if it starts becoming like a riot where you're burning private property, etc., that's not going to be tolerated.
952-728-4000 is the phone number. Morning, caller, you're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Morning, Giles. It's Gary here.
Morning, Gary.
Panel.
Good morning.
It's more of just a random comment. The best observation and comments I've heard about what's going on in the Middle East, as you call it in the West, of late, the past, since the spring, the overturning of the attempted overturning of Egypt, etc., and the Tunisia, the Arab Spring. Is that they're going through what Europe went through 500, 600 years ago, something like that, the West, Europe in particular, Europe, all the revolutions, etc. But the only thing that complicates this situation, which I think everyone would agree, unlike Western Europe in days gone past when you've had revolutions, etc., is now we've got the influence of Russia, China and America. They're stirring the pot. I should imagine taking Trump out of the equation for a moment as a businessman, because he's not a politician, but taking him out of the equation, he's obviously, America are looking, they don't want China's influence in it. And I'm very surprised how quiet Russia has been. Obviously, it's got its hands full with the Ukraine at the moment, but as far as I'm aware, they've still got an influence there. Very little is said about Syria. Their base in Syria, the Russians, to talk about Syria for a moment, the Russians had a large base there, and there's nothing spoken about that. Whether that's still there or not, I don't know. But yeah, just as I say, it's that's the best observation I've heard. Someone said a while back is that the tumult is what's going on in the Middle East is exactly what Europe went through. But as I say, it's stirred up by Russia, China, and America, no doubt. It'd be interesting. I don't know where the years have gone since the Iranian Revolution, but surely it's the same as anything else, isn't it? It goes from one extreme to the other extreme and then back again, and there don't seem to be any middle ground. Anyway, that's my take on it.
Gary,
have a good day.
Thank you for your call in there. Could you argue that these are the birth pangs of possibly a new democracy, or this is...
It depends. I think yes, in the same sense that, for example, like I said before, Mohammed bin Salman came into Saudi Arabia and started stirring things up. Don't forget, when he came along, he invited about 300 top businessmen into the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh and told them, okay, give me all your assets. You know, it wasn't, let's say, a bloodless coup. The problem I think Iran faces, let's say the Shah's son, actually, Reza Pahlavi, does come on and sits on the throne. All right. Now, from all accounts, he's not the brightest spark around. He says he's actually said that, you know, he's not really interested in going to Iran. He'd rather stay with his friends in the United States, etc., etc., etc. But the Shah himself, I mean, his father, the grandfather, shall we say, who actually was put in there by the Americans, he sort of sorted out Iran to a certain manner. Then he and the Americans didn't get on well together, so they got the Shah's son, who was actually quite a weak person, and he came along and did basically the American bidding. So what you're going to get is, if Reza Pahlavi comes on, you're going to get a government that is going to be totally subject to outside control. The oil and all of that, I mean, you'll get American oil and gas companies coming in, you'll get Halliburton's coming in and taking a lot of the business there. It will be totally subjugated. They will lose all their sovereignty. And I think a lot of people do not want that. Now, I know the diaspora of Iranians, you know, be the Swedish Iranians or the German Iranians or whoever, a lot of them actually don't mind to see someone like Reza Pahlavi come along. But if I speak to the people I know in Iran, etc., and they come from all different walks of life, what they're saying is that, yes, they would like to see change, but they do not want to see Reza Pahlavi. They do not want that. They view that as a step back, not a step forward.
Because one of the things is, it's a bit like the people who look back and go, oh, well, when Franco was in power in Spain, they're looking back with rose-tinted binoculars, if you like, thinking that, you know, Iran during the Shah's reign was a land of milk and honey and Western influences and fashions, where there was it was a very repressive state for a lot of people. And that's the reason of the fall. You're looking at me, Andreas, with that look.
No, I've just used, when you mentioned the comparison, I mean, if you ask me about my childhood when Franco was alive, and I lived in Spain, I would say to you, well, I had a normal childhood. You know, I used to go to school. My dad went to work. My mum just looked after the house and everything else. It was a normal life, no different to what you have now. Were we living under a dictator? Yes, we were. But are we better off living in a democracy? Yes, we are. So you can't say, if you go to Iran tomorrow and you ask a normal family, they go about their business and everything else, you probably say, yes, we have a normal life because we have no other option. But are they living under a dictators? They are not allowing them to be themselves. And they probably will agree with that, you know. The solution of lifting the sanctions, I mean, to me, it wouldn't be a solution. In my opinion, what that would do is perpetuate the dictators to carry on as they are. So the sanctions are there to put pressure for them, for people to, from the inside, to be able to, you know, sort of generate a change. And that we are seeing by the violent response of the forces there, that they don't want that. They want to continue to be in power, and they want to continue to control the country in their own interest. And what the caller said just now, said, oh, Europe was the same. But Europe had, the Christians had to go through the period of enlightenment until, you know, change happened. Islam hasn't had that period of enlightenment yet. I don't know if they'll ever will. But that is when you sort of in Christianity, we took away the faith for the reason, and the Islam hasn't had that. Sort of the faith is. Is still.
They've had the age of darkness, as they call it. They had that. All right, just to correct you on that supposition.
So what's for those?
The Enlightenment brought us the French Revolution and the separation of powers. Without the Age of Enlightenment, we wouldn't have had that. Islam hasn't had that period where you can separate the state from the religion, because Iran is a religious religious state
Islam
where it's not historically, it's not a religious. They're not set on one specific religion in Iran. Where there's been before the Ayatollahs, there was
the Baha'i,
choice. There was a choice of the Jewish people live there and Christians live there, and and again Islam. So there was a freedom of choice in religion. Now the theocratic government is enforcing religion onto people, and this is what has brought us to where we are now.
Is this going to perpetuate a siege mentality though amongst the Iranian? I mean, if Trump's putting 25% tariffs on, as we heard this morning, on anybody doing business, any companies doing business with Iran,
well, you mean like China and Russia?
Yeah, but if you're in power, then that just goes to say, okay, the world's against us. We're going to.
Oh, this is secondary sanctions. He's already put in secondary sanctions for people dealing with Iran and Russia. So it really is just words. As far as I'm concerned. Can I just answer a thing about a couple of things that Adira has mentioned? First of all, about the Arab Spring. If you look at what happened after the Arab Spring, 10 years on, all the same guys are back again. All the same families are back, etc. Some countries are in total chaos, like Libya, for example. Syria really wasn't affected too much by the Arab Spring, but countries like Tunisia, etc. 10 years on, the same families are ruling the country. In Iran, if you had like the so-called Arab Spring, suddenly, everything became democratic, etc. The same families would still be the same oligarchs. That does not change. People believe that all of a sudden there's a shift of money and influence from those guys who had the money to some other people. Well, you might get one or two newcomers coming in, but the money and the power still remains in the same families and always has done. Throughout history, throughout civilizations, it always is. Right? Old money stays. And if you have an Arab Spring, and this is why I'm saying that the best thing to do is to lift the sanctions, because that will force a radical change in the way Iran commercializes its economy.
Isn't there a sort of an arrogance though that we tend to think, okay, if we open up Iran, if we open up Egypt, Libya, the whole thing to Western markets and Western democracies, they will immediately start buying and become these wonderful democracies. And we saw this with Iraq. We see it with places where the Americans have gone in. And look at Russia. When the Soviet Union crumbled, we all assumed that this is going to be the great new market, and they would be a flourishing democracy on the Western model, and it doesn't work in other places.
Can I comment on that? But let me comment first of all on Andreas' issues about other religions in Iran. If you go today to Tehran, you can go to a synagogue, you can go to a Christian church. They're there. So, if you want to have freedom, and, ironically enough, if you are, the main Christians are Armenian, and if you are an Armenian Christian, you can drink wine. You can have wine, you can make wine, you can drink wine, alcoholic wine. All right, that's quite allowed. The other thing about it is you talked about Baha'i, and I remember when I first did this show, you also mentioned the Baha'i. The issues with the Baha'i religion, it was started up by it was promoted by the Shah of Iran as a counterbalance to the increasing radicalization of Shia Muslims in the country. Okay, And it became quite popular. The Baha'is became quite popular. Then when Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, and he's a Shia cleric, what happened with the Baha'is is that the Baha'is, in Islam, you have this thing that the Mahdi is going to come. like Jesus is going to come again to the Christians and whatever, yeah? The Mahdi is going to come. What the Baha'is said is that you don't have to wait any longer. We're here. We're the ones. And not only did they say that, but they also started to try and proselytize. They tried to change people's religion from traditional Shiism to Baha'ism. That in any Muslim country, whether you're Sunni or Shia, is a big no-no. And that was the problem with the Baha'is. That's why they became persecuted. Okay? So they were viewed as being, not apostates, because that's not quite the right word, but they were teaching the incorrect version of Shia Islam under Ayatollah Khomeini's eyes. Yeah. Also, a lot of the military and the influential people were supporters of the Baha'i, and it was also a good way to get rid of those people. All right. So that's where the Baha'ism came along. With Russia, and this is one of the problems that we have with shall we say, Atlanticist financial pressures. When the Soviet Union collapsed, and you had Perestroika and Glasnost and all that, you got Boris Yeltsin coming along on top of a tank. Russia came along. All Yeltsin was interested was in vodka and attractive women, and as long as he got his 5%, he didn't mind. So all these Western entities came into to Russia, and some people got fabulously wealthy. The oligarchs, absolutely fabulously wealthy. The problem was that while they were getting fabulously wealthy, the main bulk of the people of Russia were getting fantastically poor. And they were going through
They still are.
We're going fantastic, well, even worse than they were, fantastically poor. So Putin came to power, I think, about 2000. In 2003, there's quite a well-known meeting where he got these oligarchs to come in. And he said to these oligarchs three things. Well, first of all, you guys can keep your money. Second thing, you have to start investing in social service, social security for all your employees, to have some sort of base for them. So take care of your employees. And the third thing is, don't meddle with politics. Those are three things he said to these guys. Now, I think there was about 15 oligarchs. 10 of them said, okay, fine. They got on with what they were told to do. And 5 decided that, no, we're bigger than this. We can do it. And they happened to be the bank cartels. Then Putin basically put his foot down. I think 3 of these bank oligarchs went to Israel. 1 stayed in country, but bended the knee, shall we say to him. But one of them, I think it was Podorowski or something like that, his name, he got put into a prison, a gulag. He was told that you can't do it. And he was actually the Rothschild banker. And so the main issue you have, I think, with Western eyes, with the Western society, is that we look at so we say West Asia and East Asia with Western eyes.
Yeah.
And we believe that's what's good for us is good for them.
Correct.
And they have different models, and it doesn't always work.
952 78 4000. Morning caller, you're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Hi, good morning, Giles. This is Zoe. I'm calling from Marbella.
Good morning, Zoe.
I just wanted to comment on the conversations today about Iran. I was in Iran during the 12-day war, and there is a huge media bias against Iran. During that time, there was a massive rally, pro-government rally, which the media did not cover. And this is happening even now. It's true that people are unhappy with the economy, but they do not want change from outside. After all the years that experience the Iranians have had, they know that the American doesn't feel sorry for the Iranian people. I mean, we've had the 8-year war where America supported Iraq, and when the chemical weapons were used against Iranians and Iranians complained through UN, America vetoed it. We have even Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam after the chemical weapons were used. So Iranians have a long memory of not wanting interference from abroad. They are clever enough, they can make change within the country. And even now, with the protests that are happening, there are huge pro-government rallies. And it's amazing that the media uses those images to show them as against government. And, when you have people like Netanyahu and Pompeo saying, we are there amongst you, and President Trump says, I'm coming to use force if people are killed. This is an incentive for saboteurs to actually use violence against the police. I mean, there are people that are killed are children and innocent bystanders. Ambulances are set on fire. So these are not Iranian people who are protesting genuinely against demonstrations, against economy, are doing it. And Iranian people are fed up that whenever they have genuine demonstrations, those demonstrations are used by America or Israel to say, we're coming to help you. We are going to bring Pahlavi, who is absolutely sold his soul to the devil. So I just wanted to say, from an insider who's been there during the war, and I'm listening and watching what's happening on the local media, that the media is extremely biased. So they're not portraying a true picture of what's going on in Iran.
Zoe, thank you very much for your call, and good to hear from you.
Thanks
for the call.
For your program. Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
952-78-4000. A quick break and then back with more Viewpoint.
Talk Radio Europe. Viewpoint with
Giles Brown.
Always live, always lively. Joined in the studio by Richard Cow and Andres Gallardo. Just having a quick look at we were talking about will there be regime change in Iran because of the recent events there. Looking at the poll that I've got at the moment, 84% of you say there will be regime change. 16% say no. Go to the Facebook page, Talk Radio Europe Official. Put your vote in there, should you wish. Some of the WhatsApps coming in as well. Sam, well said, caller. That's the last call in from Zoe. Morning to Richard over in the UK. He is saying, right then, wrong question. Should there be regime change in the US? Iranian inflation is 48%. Iranians love everything American and British, which is why most of their cars are French. Will Khamenei leave Iran by January 16th, 2%, January 31st, 9%, March 31st, 24%. Sanctions aren't going to be lifted. The opposite is true when Fat Donny, his words not mine, has put further tariffs on with any other nations doing direct trade with Iran. It's no different to what's happening right now in the US. The poor are getting much poorer. The rich and corrupt are ransacking the nation's gold. Meanwhile, Gary comes in. Are the Arab Farsi countries used to democracy? We cannot view the governance of these types of countries in the same as the West.
One point I wanted to make in reference to these demonstrations, because the caller Zoe, she said that demonstrations pro-government as well.
There have been pro-government.
I think you have to be careful with demonstrations because if you look historically, for instance, in 1974, there was a big demonstration in the Royal Square in Madrid in favor of Franco. 1974. I mean, Franco came on the balcony. They almost had to prop him up because he was on his last legs. At that time, there was a big movement. People really wanted change and they wanted democracy. And that, after he died, that's what happened. But you can say, at that time, look, the people of Spain want, the perpetuation of the dictator. Look at this demonstration. It was massive. I remember their images right now. If you look at demonstrations in Catalonia, for instance, where there was very loud and at some points they were quite violent as well, you would probably think, and in the international media reported it as, all Catalans want the independence, when it wasn't true. So with demonstrations, now we're seeing demonstrations in Iran. The lady said the demonstrations pro-government. The demonstration pro-government don't prove that the people in Iran massively support it. The same way the demonstrations against the regime now are the demonstrations pro-democracy or to destroy the current government, simply because they've been triggered by inflation and by the cost of living and so on. So with street demonstrations, you have to be careful because you cannot sort of say that that's definitely what everyone wants. They make a lot of noise and they are very spectacular in terms of the imagery they produce, but not necessarily tell you the exact pulse of the whole nation. The only way of demonstrating what the pulse of the nation is in reality is when people can vote, and that will tell you really what the majority of people want, and that's not a solution for a lot of the countries who cannot implement democracy, because historically they don't have the tradition of democracy, and it take time for that to sort of get to sink into the population, but that to me is the only way to demonstrate what a nation really wants.
I mean, because if you looked at sort of the scenes coming out of London this last summer with over 130,000 people doing that, that Great Britain march, you would think that is the pulse of the nation. Yeah.
And one more thing, in terms of when we see all these figures reported, Richard said, you have to be careful with the figures that they are being reported of the dead people in this demonstration. I also question that, whether those figures are right, because they come from, sort of sources that I'm not quite sure who they are. But the same way we had to be careful with the figures quoted by Hamas during the conflict in Gaza, where they branded by all the media all around the world numbers. They came from Hamas and they weren't verified by anyone else. So you have to be careful on one side, but also you have to be careful on the other.
They can't be verified by anyone else because Israel doesn't allow anyone else to be in Gaza. So it can't be verified by anyone else. Now, as far as the French cars in Iran, yes, Peugeot used to manufacture, and I think it's Codro who had the license to manufacture these Peugeot-type cars, but they make their own. The only other thing I would say about, that the people voting, what was the percentage that voted for Labour in the last UK election? That wasn't exactly a mass demonstration pro in favour of Labour. Actually, interesting enough,
hold on a second, Richard. They want a majority in Parliament, didn't they?
Oh, a huge majority, which is incredible.
Yeah, you try, and people had the freedom to go to vote or not to vote.
Yes.
So that's a demonstration of what freedom can do for you. You can sort of participate or not.
Well, because of the lack of people voting, it shows that people don't give a damn about what's happening in politics.
But that's a different argument.
So obviously
people are not engaged with politics these days.
So voting is not viewed as a good way of showing your
you have the freedom to engage with politics or not. I mean, this is disenchantment with politics. I can understand that, and that's happening in the Low Countries, not only in the UK. But that doesn't mean that the system is the fairest way we have to prove what route the nation wants to take. And it's clear by the majority that the people in the UK, for whatever the reasons are behind it, whether they weren't happy with the Conservatives or they weren't happy with this or the other, it doesn't matter. What it matters is that there is an elected parliament where the majority is now Labour, and we have to put up with it. Because that is the rules of the... Well, we don't.
We live here.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we don't.
Generally. Well, I have to put up with Pedro Sanchez and I shut up about it because I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, can I just make one comment as well? I watched Rory Stewart and was it Alistair Campbell?
Alistair Campbell, yeah.
Who was The Rest is Politics. And they were talking about Iran, and they started showing video clips of anti-government protests. Unfortunately, what they were showing was people protesting with the image of Ayatollah Khamenei. They were actually pro-governments. So even these guys can get it wrong. As I say, you've got to be extremely careful on what you see on television, because most things tend to be quite biased.
As we see, I mean, it's always because of though there has been a sort of shutdown, hasn't there, of internet in Iran over the past couple of days.
No, it's up now.
But there were...
It was down for 2 days because they were saying that... Well,
technical problem.
No, they said, no. They said the rioters...
come on, Richard, I mean...
I didn't say technical... I said... let me finish. The reason why they put it down was that the rioters were communicating with each other using internet service and also using Starlink, Elon Musk's thing. They found a whole lot of apparatus that were suitable for Starlink, and they've confiscated them and taken them away. So that's the reason why it went down. Now, that is a course that most countries take when there is trouble. If you look at countries where there is upheaval, etc., one of the first things they do is remove internet connectivity. It happens everywhere.
What countries are these?
Well, all the ones that have autocratic regimes.
Oh, okay. So they want
in the Middle East. In the Middle East, nearly every single one of them does that.
Okay. Yeah.
And we're talking about Western Asia here. Yeah. You can't, as I said, you can't judge Western Asia and Eastern Asia with Atlanticist eyes. Right? You've got to be very careful when you judge that.
952 78 4000 is the phone number. This in, Andres has an issue with stats that don't suit his narrative. Labour won on 33.7%. Bingo! His hatred for Sanchez is pathetic. There you go, Andres.
Well, there you go. Just let me just tell you, who's got the majority in British Parliament?
Labour.
I wonder. Labour, yeah? Okay, so that's the only point that I've made there. And I don't like Sanchez, and a lot of people in Spain don't like Sanchez. So I'm not unique in that sense.
What's the Sanchez reaction been like? Because he likes to at the moment get involved with on the international stage, isn't he?
On the Iranian issue, he's advocating for diplomacy and peace talks, like they always do in the European Union.
952 78 4000 into the last 2 minutes or so of the first half of this morning's Viewpoint. If you want to get involved or leave a message on the WhatsApp, here are the numbers.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
Looking at the poll on the TRE Talk Radio official Facebook page, regime change in Iran, do you think there will be? At the moment, we have 84% thinking there will be regime change, 16% thinking that there won't be. So if you want to get involved, that's the place to leave your thoughts on that as well. Looking at... No, that's just more bits and pieces coming in on there. With you until 12 o'clock today, then Stephen Ritson takes over for Europe Today between 12 and 2 o'clock, and I'm sure that he'll have some thoughts on all of the subjects that we have been talking about thus far this morning. In the second, if you've got something you want to talk about, be it national, international or local, please feel free to get in touch. It can be your thoughts on the situation developing in Iran. Also, we were looking at what's been happening over in the States since we last talked, as well as the UK's reaction to grok social media and images, and is that a liberties issue? Should you be able to write or post what you want to do in the name of democracy / free state? Going out to the national and international news at the top of the hour, and then we'll be back with more Viewpoint here on TRE Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain. But the national and international news is up next.
You're listening to Talk Radio Europe.
Discuss, challenge, inform, comment, Viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe.
Giles Brown.
Live comment and discussion with studio guests. Viewpoint.
Always live, always lively, back with you until 12 o'clock today, joined in the studio by Andres Gallardo and Richard Cow. If you want to get involved with today's show, it can be national, international or local. Here's the numbers.
To contact TRE, please call 952 78 4000. Email studio@tre.radio. Send us a WhatsApp on +34 645 99 67 95. Message us on Facebook, Talk Radio Europe Official, or tweet us at TRE Talk Radio.
Well, let's look at some of the WhatsApps that have come in since we were... Andres, so it's okay. Are you okay, Andres? I mean, you just...
I am absolutely fine.
Fine, okay, no problem. I mean, we're only 13 days into 2026. You haven't got your 30 days free.
It's Tuesday the 13th.
You got your 30-day free trial. You can give the year back if you don't without paying anyway. You cancel your subscription. Let's have a look at some of the WhatsApps coming in on +34 645 99 67 95. Despite the PSE are still in power despite PP winning the last election. Meanwhile, hello, we go live to the lines. Morning, caller, you're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Good morning, Giles.
Good morning, Alf. How are you doing?
I didn't join last week to wish everybody the best of New Year's because it was a national holiday. It's still Three Kings, so I was enjoying my family.
Fair enough. Well, Happy New Year to you, Alf.
And to you, and
you
to
were thoroughly
Andrea,
missed,
and to
Alf.
you, Richard. Long time no hear.
Absolutely. I'm back from the wilderness.
Hardly the wilderness, unless you were going to talk about Israel again.
Moving swiftly onwards. Alf, what's your viewpoint, please?
Yeah, I was ringing to say, I mean, I agree with what Andreas was saying about the people of Iran, when questioned, and they say, we are leading a normal life, and that's because it's the life that they know. And I think too many people, and I think Richard was pertaining to it as well, that we judge others by our own standards, and that's not quite the way we should do things. So the people of Iran, yes, they've got their problems, yes, they're trying to sort themselves out, but I agree with most of what I've heard on the news that the last thing they want is some interference from either America or Russia or China or anybody else for that matter. What they want to do is sort themselves out. And I think from what Richard was saying, having that knowledge of the area, that things are gradually, which is what always happens. Everybody assumes you're going to have a revolution, and it's very, very rarely happens in the nicest possible way. Most things are evolutionary. You can look at the Russian Revolution or whatever. Yes, occasionally there are, but after that revolution, the people themselves evolve. So it's always an evolutionary change, and I think that's what Iran may be going through. It's just some people are obviously frustrated that it's not going good enough, and they're affected because it's where they live and it's their food and all the rest of it. And Richard was absolutely right, and I think sometimes on Viewpoint we miss the significant points. Old money stays. It doesn't matter where in history you look, where you go in the world, it's always things change, but the people with the money always come out on top. It's the system, isn't it? And they use their money, which they can hide away. I said this. The classic example was Idi Amin driving out the East African Asians from Africa, and they all end up. And they said, we had all these refugees coming into the UK. And you go, no, the majority of East African Asians who ended up in the UK were rich. They bought houses. They have a specific way of life that, they weren't allowed to gamble for a kick-off because they're Muslims. So they put their money into the Bank of India. And instead of gambling, what they do is invest it in more property and stuff like that. So they grew and grew and grew in the UK massively. And then you had the refugees at the end, the poorer people who didn't have that system to go by. So it was the old money that carried on the system and is carried on the system and will carry on the system. I was interested in what Zoe said as well about the media. I didn't quite get. We always say, don't we? The bias that the media put on is significant to the conversations that we have. And there is a massive bias. And one of the things that I haven't really understood in this Iran thing is, what is the media bias? There isn't a media bias. There's a government bias, isn't there? There's America putting their two-penny in. these other groups that Richard explained that from outside the country who wanted to rule the country, who were never allowed to, who want to put their pressure on. There's the other Middle East country. I don't know what the right term is for the Middle East. I've only ever known it as the Middle East. But the Middle East countries, Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all of those, are also putting their pressure in, because the last thing they want to see is more conflict in the zone. So I don't know how much of it is media bias.
I suppose one of the things,
or whether it's government bias.
But if you look at sort of the pictures we're going to get, I mean, they're always going to be sort of Iranians demonstrating outside the embassy in London, for example. You know, the guy climbing up the front of the embassy and putting the old Iranian flag out, and of course that makes those who are displaced after 79 are obviously going to be against the current Iranian regime.
Yes,
I suppose it's easier pictures, isn't it, Alf? That's the thing.
It was the old Shah that caused the problem in Iran that created the situation in the first place, and the so-called revolution that took place. I worked with a guy who was from Persia, not Iran. He came from Persia, and he escaped. His family escaped from whatever was going on, and he never did anything but blame the Shah. Even though he'd escaped, even though he didn't want to do all of that, and he hated the new Ayatollah regime that came in, he's Persian to the core, and they did all sorts of things in order to escape from Persia and again end up in the UK, because we're home to every waif and stray in the world. We can't say no to anybody who looks like they've got a problem. But it was never as clear as that, was it? So the Shah wasn't a good person from the perspective of the people I know, the Persians that I knew who escaped from under all of that, mainly because of what had happened with the Ayatollah. But I also didn't like the Shah either, and he was the cause of a problem. So, and that was corruption, as I understood it. Corruption by them, we feed ourselves and the rest can go poor. And the last thing is, I suppose, is because Richard always does this, and Andreas, I'll give Andreas his due. He was very defensive of this, and I accept it. To say, if it's about populism, how many people voted for Labour at the last general election? Irrespective of the size of the majority, I've said all the way through the piece, Labour did not gain more support than they had from 2 elections before. They gained support based on the daft things that we did 6, 7, or 8 years ago. We had daft leaders. But in reality, Labour never really moved anywhere. What did they gain? About 1.5% of the vote. And unfortunately, and perhaps it's a question not for now but for the future, is if you think that was weird, first past the post created that situation, but if you think it's weird that 33, less than 34%, no parties won elections with less than about 42%, and then all of a sudden we had the SNP come along who created a problem, and then we had the third party creating a growth. And now we've got, is it a 4-party system or is it a 5-party system? And I think, at the next general election, all the forecasts are, nobody can see a winner getting more than about 30% of the vote. And irrespective of what we think about that, as Andreas quite rightly says, that's our democracy, no different to, and I know he doesn't like Sanchez, but at least he accepts the fact Sanchez got there because he was voted and elected to be there through a democratic vote. How people vote and why they vote the way they do, whoever knows. Yeah. But democracy we defend to the death, because at least, as Andreas quite rightly says, at least you have a choice. The choice is you can go and vote if you want. You can vote for the wrong person if you want, but at least you get a choice. You can vote well, you don't have to vote. Nobody's going to come along with a gun and force you to do something that you don't want to do.
Indeed. Alf, as always, good to hear from you, my friend. Speak to you soon. Alf, regular caller.
Good programme so far, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
Cheers, boys.
Take care.
You would say that, Alf.
952 78 4000 is the phone number. Studio at TRE.radio is the email. You can send us a message via Facebook as well. Just getting some breaking news, apparently, that Iranians are allowed to make phone calls. That's going to be an interesting one. That's just flashing up on my...
No, the internet is up and running.
The internet's up and running.
Yeah.
So the technical problems are finished.
Yeah.
You only mentioned technical problems. No one else did.
I hope you can see the irony on it.
Can I just say that on Alf's call about issues in the Middle East, we have the traditional ones that everyone knows about. But what people might not be aware of is the two Gulf states, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Now they're starting to get at loggerheads with each other. So you have, for example, the war that's ongoing in Libya. The UAE supports Haftar and Saudi Arabia supports the other side. You have the Sudan civil war, if you really want to call it, but it's a war about gold. And again, the UAE, what UAE is doing is supporting Hebeti, who lent soldiers to the UAE to fight in Yemen. So when the UAE joined Saudi Arabia to fight in Yemen, they used Sudanese soldiers by Hebeti. And Hebeti is he was a businessman, now a warlord. And he controls the Darfur area where there is gold. So he's basically taking the gold and putting it into his little bank account in the UAE.
It's all about minerals and it's all about oil. Money.
It's
all about money. Let's go to a caller. Morning, caller. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Good morning, Giles. It's Charles from Mallorca here.
Good morning, Charles.
To expand a little bit on Alf's remark about the multi-party system that is now in existence, should we say, not governs, its existence in the UK. Any multi-party system immediately makes the first past the post situation totally undemocratic. As I've explained to people who aren't at all political, you can have the situation with 10 parties and someone can win with 11% of the vote. The system needs to change to a more democratic system.
Yeah, I think the thing...
all the systems have their flaws. I like the British system because the theory of it, at least, is that you elect a member of parliament who will represent your area and your district, your constituency. And so you have a point of reference in Parliament, which is your MP. Whether you vote for him or not, he's going to be your representative. If you go to proportional representation, you have the situation like in Spain, where you have marginal parties like regional parties having a big influence on national politics, where they have no interest in national politics, they're only interested in their bit. So all the systems have got their flaws. There's no a perfect democratic system in place. So sometimes I look at the British one and I think, I like that one. Where the British look at the Spanish system, they say with proportional representation, they think, that's a much better system. It's got its flaws as well. So there's no perfect system.
I was invited to a lecture.
I agree. There's no perfect system, but the first past the post system compared to some form of proportional representation is just unbelievably wrong for a system where now, with not besides the original front runners, should we say, of the Tories and the Labour, you've got SNP, you've got now Reform, God help us. You've still got the Lib Dems. Now the new your party under Jeremy and
allegedly, and of course the Greens the Greens, of course,
and the Greens. Yep, they're coming. So there's just too many, and really it takes all the democracy out of it because you vote for the guy you want, but you can't vote out the guy you don't want. So let's take a look. Reform. They are very divisive. So you've either got real reformers or you've got no way. I'm one of the no wayers, as you probably gather already. The thought of having Nigel Farage in number 10 is horrendous. But it means that these smaller parties get no say at all. I think what we need is a form of PR. An alternative vote system, I think, is probably as close as we get to what we need. And to have a constitution with a law similar to the one that Cameron brought in when he was in with the Lib Dems, to make for a fixed 5-year term with the safeguards that, yes, it can be got rid of if the whole of Parliament agrees to it.
But wouldn't you have the problem then of all the sort of the horse trading that we have at the moment in Spain, though? I mean, if you see Sanchez doing deals with, with parties...
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, if you think that 5 or 6 parties is a lot, look at the Spanish Parliament.
Look at the German Parliament.
Or look at the German Parliament, yeah. So it's just... And then you've got situations where Sanchez, who didn't win the election, that's what I wanted to correct Alf there, he didn't win the election, but he managed to get the power through all these marginal groups, marginal parties that propped him up to Prime Minister. Quite legitimate, don't get me wrong, that's how the system works, so we have to accept that. But the reality is that the one who didn't win the election managed to get to power, you're being propped up by other marginal parties.
Got some more calls coming in there, so just thanks for your call in, and I just want to take this next call, but thanks for the call in there. 952 78 4000.
Okay.
Morning caller, you're live on TRE. What's your name, where you're calling from, what's your viewpoint, please?
Yeah, hi, it's John in Mijas.
John?
I don't want to take this off too much of a tangent, but was it Charles, who was last on, he said that they need to change the system in first past the post. They could change the system in first past the post, but retain it in each ward, so that you would still have a local MP to represent you, because they would have been elected in your ward. Is it a ward or your electorate area? But it would perhaps give a better reflection on who wants who in Parliament.
That's a thought. That's a thought indeed, John. Thank you for the call in on that one. Richard, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say I was lucky to be invited to a lecture by Michael Portillo, who I find one of the cleverest chaps on earth.
When he's on a train somewhere in Spain.
He's a bit out there, but I mean, if you listen to him, I mean, he was speaking for about an hour with no notes whatsoever, not a single an R or hesitation, and he was speaking on the democracy is still new, democracy on trial, and he was basically saying that there is no system that is perfect. So whether we go to proportional representation, whether we go to first past the post, there's always going to be ifs and buts. What he was saying as well, and I've heard this before, is that people should start looking more at local politics, where they actually can affect some sort of change. As the last caller, as I mentioned, look at your wards, etc. And one of my relatives is actually involved in local politics. I hate to say for the Reform Party, but that's beside the point.
That's what made me smile with the previous caller when he said, God forfend.
That's beside the point. And this is and basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, well, hold it. If you're going to represent Reform, you actually have to you actually have to live in the area in your ward. I mean, there's one guy who lives in Fulham, which is just around the corner from where this ward is. And they're saying, no, you have to come from the actual area that you're trying to represent. So at least, if you start looking at local politics, you can start changing things, because there's a theory, okay? And you go on this conspiracy theory. But have you heard of a chap called Carroll Quigley? Carol is in double L.
The blank look on my face, Richard, Andreas.
And mine.
Yeah. Okay, he's quite in geopolitics. He's quite a well-known chap. Back in he was a Harvard graduate, did his doctorate and everything there in Harvard. Then he lectured in Princeton and ended up in Georgetown on foreign affairs. And he also was an advisor to the U.S. Foreign Affairs Committees. And he basically started giving theories about, who rules and how is government run. And essentially what it was saying is that the prime ministers, the premiers of countries are really sort of middle management. They are actually instructed, and they are basically told to give the story, a palatable story, to the people as to why this is happening. But the strings, and we'll go into it some other day, because otherwise people will say it's a little bit conspiratorial.
But we're going back to old money and old families again, then, presumably, which we were just talking about in the first hour.
Yeah,
So
you've heard of the Slade Endowment, professorships of the arts. Back in 1870s, I think it was, Slade created at Oxford, Cambridge, and London University chair for the arts. They didn't exist. Other chairs existed, but not for the arts. So at Oxford, which is the relevant one in this case, a chap called John Ruskin, who you've heard of, who is one of these polymaths, good at bloody everything. He was the first professor, Slade professor. And his policy was total, he was an empire builder. This was at the height of the British Empire, and he believed that we've been given a gift, a divine gift. We should sort of propagate this, not only to the elite, because he was surrounded around by the elite, but also to the rest of the British. And once we did the British, then it should be exported. And if you go to various areas like the East End of London, etc., you will see houses that were set up by people like Ruskin to try and help educate the less elite people of the UK.
This is philanthropism, isn't it?
Philanthropy, yes. Yeah. Now, one of his main, one of his first students was a chap called Cecil Rhodes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cecil Rhodes, again, as we know, he made his fortune. He'd be like the Elon Musks or the Ellisons at the moment with the wealth that he generated in South Africa. He basically he was of the same school of thought as Ruskin, said, we have this gift and we should expand it to the world. It's very Hobbesian. If you know the difference between Hobbesian and Rousseau's philosophy, it's very Hobbesian. So, do as I tell you and it'd be great. A bit like what Trump does. But he said that, we want to actually educate the people, but along the British Empire way. So he started a group, and it's called the Round Table. That's one of the names, or Cliveden Set, etc. An association also called Helpers. And these were people who could help further the cause. And these are people with influence. So the first three guys was obviously Cecil Rhodes, Lord Milner, and Stead. Now, Stead was the Rupert Murdoch of the time. Mm-hmm. So he controlled the Times and various other publications. So you got the PR side of it as well. And what they did is they said, well, how can we influence what goes on? And they said, well, we can do it because we have money. So they used their money basically to influence governments. And this started leading on to central banks. And also one of the interesting things about it, he actually wanted to get the United States back into the fold of the British Empire. So the next satellite office to be opened was in New York. And again, that point of view was using old money. So you have families like the Warburg families, who are very influential in the German family, but also very influential in the United States. You have the Safras from Lebanon, the Rothschilds, etc. And they just start forming this group of elites. And these are the people who move the money. And if you look nowadays, you can actually follow the money flows to try and see how geopolitics is being affected. And it's actually quite interesting to, and it's quite enlightening because it explains a lot of things that's going on.
952-78-4000 is the phone number. Going to the WhatsApp, some bits and pieces coming in. Looking at, okay, so the British media, Richard, the British media is widely considered to have a political bias. Cameron beat Miliband in 2015 on 36.9%. Blair beat Howard in 2005 on 35.2%. Real reformers within reform, who are? They're all failed Tories. They're called constituencies, not wards. Michael Portillo, sad man on a train. Meanwhile, that would rule out Uncle Nige, giving he's rarely in Clacton, let alone lives there. Other bits and pieces coming in. Michael Portillo, well, I'm pretty sure Michael Portillo is colourblind, as his wardrobe assistant is teasing us. He's wearing some very colourful trousers indeed.
He is a bit out there.
Yeah, he's a bit out there. This coming in, this is from the People's Republic of Manilva. I think Andrés is pata negra, and everyone thinks that Sanchez is totally corrupt. That's Paul from the People's Republic of Manilva. Another one saying, Linda and Paul Estepona, we think Andrés is great and love it when he shares his irritation about Sanchez. So there you go. So we'll get some merchandise for this year. Quick break and then back with more Viewpoint.
This is TRE. Viewpoint with
Giles Brown.
Always live, always lively. Giles Brown, joined by Andres Gallardo and Richard Cow. Richard's looking at the asking something. Listen, since we last, as somebody said to me the other day, we're only 13 days now into the year. I'm not going to do the 30-day trial of 2026. I want my money back, because for those who are thinking it's going to be a quiet news time until maybe March or whatever, then it's been explosive, to put it mildly, since we last left. And this is just blowing my mind, because this is less than a week ago, with the shooting, of course, in Minneapolis, of the woman who was protesting, blocking, whatever you want to say, the fatal shooting of an American citizen in Minneapolis, and the political division that has called, and the fallout from that before we have had any chance to sort of have an inquiry. It has just been, Andres, what are your, horrendous situation, and it calls into question of, what is going on in the States, Andres?
What is going on? Trump had a pledge on the election. He said he would get rid of at least 1 million illegal immigrants from the United States per year. Now, if you try to get those numbers expelled from the country through the legal channels, you're not going to achieve that. So he's gone, what I would say, above the law, if you like, and he's created, he's recruited a massive number of agents to join ICE. And these agents, just to enforce, almost a law unto themselves, to enforce these immigration rules and, to expel all these numbers that he has pledged he would do. He said he was going to do it, and in all fairness to Trump, he is doing it. The only thing he's doing it through questionable legal routes. What we saw the other day in Minneapolis, if you see the video, to me, that's the execution of a woman. That's what I can see in the video. However, last night I was brave enough to have a look at Fox News to see what they had to say. And to my surprise, the commentators in Fox News, they were saying that it was quite reasonable, the shooting, because she posed a reasonable threat to the officers. I don't know what video they were looking at and how they were analyzing it, but I couldn't see any kind of justification for shooting the woman like they did. Which leads me to the administration also defending the actions of the officers, which leads me to believe that he is going to, whatever it takes, he's going to take the pledge of getting rid of all these immigrants, whatever it takes, whether it was through lawful channels or unlawful channels. And that's the impression I got after the events in Minneapolis the other day.
The thing is with this is this should never have been the officer or whoever, the ICE agent. How can that be a cause to draw your weapon? I know we go on about, and I'm sure I'll get some calls in a minute, but it seems that this went from nothing into a fatality in literally 0.0 seconds.
The weapon itself must have already been drawn as she was turning round, because as soon as the car was off, she was shot. So It takes time to unholster your pistol. And then
they're already pointing. You can see in the video, they're already pointing when she's,
So it's absolutely ridiculous. I agree with Andreas on this one. That I'm flabbergasted at what we see. I'm totally amazed at some of the ways that they just take people off the street. There was a Turkish student, Colombia or whatever, and they just come up, unmarked cars. There is no insignias or numbers or names or whatsoever. I remember I used to live in Houston for my sins a long while ago, and there was a case at cleaning lane about 3:00 in the morning. Was driving down, and an unmarked car was flashing her to stop, and she didn't. She carried on, and so they basically shot him. It was a unmarked police car, 3:00 in the morning, and it was a black lady.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
You could have you could have looking at the images. I mean, the officer could have pointed at the wheels of the car to mobilize the car and arrest the woman. I mean, there was no need to execute her the way.
We'll come back to that after this call. Morning, call. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Yeah, hi, it's Johnny Mee.
Hi,
John. To cover the first point is that, certainly from my firearms training, and when we tried shooting tyres, bullets bounce off tyres. You can't actually shoot them except in films, or if you have a high-powered rifle. That's just by the by. But the other thing is I actually slowed down and re-looked several times at various videos of that shooting. And although my immediate reaction was, yeah, the officer killed the woman completely unlawfully. But if you slow it down, in America, of course, nobody knows who's going to be armed. The officer actually did draw his gun, the one in front of the car, and the car initially started moving, and it appeared that it was going towards the officer. Now, it may have been turning to the right, and the wheels may have been turned. But when you're standing at a threat like that, you're not actually looking at the wheels, you're looking at the threat. And within milliseconds, he pulled the gun or pulled the trigger. So I'm personally not 100% convinced that he was as wrong as the media make out.
I mean,
having said that, I thought the George Floyd incident, the officer should have been found not guilty. So I get them wrong.
I mean, looking at the situation here, you're looking at again. It's like you could argue it's like having special constables having arms. I mean, these are the people who are trained as the police are in firearms. John, you'll agree with this, and they just, they're pumped up. They think they're a great paramilitary force. They're going in to clear the streets of whatever, and this sort of thing is always going to happen if they are that.
Training. They have a very short training program.
But that may well have happened. That may well have happened if that officer had actually been a trained police officer with years of experience of using firearms. Because if a vehicle is driving towards you and the gun is already drawn, then it's not surprising that the officer thinks that the car is actually going to drive at him. So he pulls the trigger, having already got the gun out. If he drew the gun as it was happening, that's different. He has more time to think. But in the seconds between the car starting to move and him pulling the trigger is not even 1 second, I don't think.
The problem with going on slow-mo is like watching a football match, a foul in a football match. When you see it on real time, you go, well, so. When you look at it slow-mo, you start having doubts about how that foul was committed and who really was the guilty party. And I think with this case in Minneapolis, the people shouldn't shoot on first. She was a lady, a white lady, middle-aged, whatever. I find the reaction, maybe it's a sign of this is what United States is all about.
Because immediately...
With all due respect, you're not a trained, I presume you're not a trained firearms officer. I was. And that easy assumption makes it think that one has all the time in the world to make a decision. One doesn't. I've never pulled a trigger. I've drawn the gun a couple of times. I've never actually fired it. But what you do in the moment when you're actually under threat and you believe you're under threat, and there was a case, Cabo, the officer, I don't know if that's been resolved, where the police officer shot the guy Cabo in London. And again, that was criticised, but he was driving the car at him. Well, that's what he believed. So anyway, I'll leave it there.
Can I ask you a question before you go?
Sure.
If it'd been you in that situation, for the information you got from the video that you see, you would have used the firearm? Is that what you're trying to say? You would have done the same thing?
I think it's a distinct possibility, yeah.
Okay.
Got some more calls coming in, John, as always. Thank you very much for that one. 952-784-4000. Morning, call. You're live on TRE. What's your name? Where are you calling from? What's your viewpoint, please?
Morning, Giles. Peter.
Hello, Peter.
Good morning. Your radio station's not working on my car, and it's not my car, but and the app's not too good neither, so I'm getting a lot of feedback and stuff. So let's take the emotion out of this for a moment, shall we? Because everybody's going on about these snippets they've seen and what they have seen, what they haven't seen, and he said, she said, and he started it, she started it. So I'll leave you to the emotion after I've said this. First of all, under the Minnesota statute of, I think it's 906.065, there is a justification for taking life, and 6.6, the following one, is the authorization of deadly force from a peace officer. Now, we can sit here and we can say what we thought, what we see. There's, as I said about the Boston bombing, there is going to be tens of thousands of videos, tens of thousands of statements, and this is going to take a year or two before it gets into court. And when it gets into court, it's going to go down about 5 seconds. And there's going to be a judge and jury. He's entitled to be judged by his peers under the Constitution, and it will be decided from that. And there will be the elite lawyers on both sides, and they will have to make a decision. And we can't decide on whether the cat lady from so-and-so with her comfortable shoes and getting in her car and going to when one of them gets out of the car and says, "Come on, big boy, let's bring it on." You're talking about ICE agents. You're talking stormtroopers. No, I don't want to. I've said before, the militarization of the police all over the world, not just in America. These stormtroopers, nobody wants to see them on the streets. I want to see them on Bermuda shorts and Fred Perry T-shirts and giving you traffic directions. But unfortunately, it's the world we live in. So the one thing she's guilty of, and I'm not making judgments on anyone, and I just said, let's wait till it goes out, but she's guilty of a poor choice, a very, very poor choice. Now, what person decides to put the dog in the car, make a flask of coffee, and nip down to the local town and block the high street with your vehicle when there's ICE agents or any type of agents around? It's just absolutely ridiculous. Does she deserve to die? No. But it's a stupid thing to do. Now, going back to him, he's been dragged before by a car. All this business doesn't come into it. And their personalities doesn't come into it. It comes down to the law. Was he justified? Did he generally, at that time, fear for his safety and fear for others' safety? And that's what's going to come down to. And I personally think, and again, I'm not prejudging here, I just think it's very, very difficult, it should be very, very difficult, to say somebody went out and used excessive force when, as it's just been said, she's committing a crime there. It's not like she's standing on the side of the road. Or I've been in a situation 30 years ago, more, when I got stopped by a state trooper. Mm-hmm. And in America, those who know the law, know the Constitution, if you go through a DUI stop or anything like that, and you've not committed a crime, all you need to say to that officer, because you have a Constitution, say to that officer, "Have I committed a crime today, sir?" "Madam, no." "Am I free to go?" Then they have to decide whether you have committed a crime or not committed a crime. If you're not committed a crime, you're free to go. If you committed a crime, they're quite within the rights to ask you to exit the vehicle to show your identification. She was asked to exit the vehicle. She decided not to exit the vehicle, and the vehicle sped off. And they are armed officers. There's other people around, and they don't know whether she's carrying a gun. They don't know whether she's carrying fuel or anything like that.
As you said, a poor choice has cost her life, Peter, in your
poor
case.
choice has cost her life. And the reason I know that, because I've been in front of a judge on numerous occasions, many, many times, and all because of my poor choices. And I had to pay the consequences. And the very first correctional officer I ever met in my life said to me, "Stop whining. You can't do the crime. If you can't do the time, don't do the crime." Okay. Now, that, to me, was an absolutely ridiculous thing to do. Stay off the streets, stay out of the way, let the authorities do what they're doing. The only reason, as Andreas said, "Oh, Trump's gone over the top, this over the top." Not over the top. All they got to do is do what they're doing. Spain, I've been stopped numerous times in Spain. Never committed a crime. I've been stopped. Do I ask for my ID? What do I do? Show them my ID.
Okay, let me just tell you a very quick one. It only happened a few days ago. A car was stopped in a police control here in Spain. Not far from where I live, there was a police control, and one of the cars, when it got stopped, suddenly sped away Okay. The police, as you probably would have seen them, they are armed to their ears, but nobody shot at the car. The car was reported, and 2 miles down the road, and another patrol car stopped him, searched the car, and they found that there were drugs in it, so they were arrested. But at no point anyone started shooting at the car. What I'm trying to say, in this particular case, if the woman had driven away, there's means where the police could have followed her or identified her and arrested at a later point. There's no need to draw a gun and shoot the woman dead. I mean, we're talking about drawing a gun and shooting someone dead.
His gun must have been drawn. Unless he's on a swivel holster.
Just pulling the trigger. You've got enough infrastructure in the police and the ICE department and everything else to be able to neutralize this woman easily without the need of killing her. That's what I'm trying to say.
As people say,
he didn't set out to kill her. That's where you're getting all emotional again. He didn't go out to kill anybody. He didn't get up that morning and say, I'm going to kill somebody. And she didn't get up and say, I'm going to go and get killed. It's an incident that happened within...
Just one point. This ICE officer, 6 months previous, in a similar situation, was dragged.
It was car dragged.
Yeah, it was car dragged. Now, I'm not sure what the police instructions are and how it works, but surely if a guy like that has suffered that sort of incident, he would be under evaluation. He would go to speak to
a psychiatrist. 6 months ago, so he probably had been evaluated.
Yeah, my question is, surely this person should be evaluated after an incident like this, because otherwise his judgment's going to be impaired. I'm asking.
But as you just said, it was 6 months ago, and he's probably been evaluated. But also,
I don't know. You see, that's the whole thing. I mean, has he?
Not all right.
He should have been, but I very much doubt that he was.
Oh, I very much think he was. Again, you're factoring in the ifs, buts, and maybes.
Yeah.
It's about the facts. The fact of the matter was, a car had committed a crime. An armed officer had asked her to exit the vehicle. She attempted then to drive away. That would have been pretty easy to do what Andreas just said. But the fact that the officer had his hand on the bonnet at the time makes it a whole big difference. And the only way we're ever going to find out the truth is wait till it goes through court.
And of course, there's been a massive political pile-on from both sides. You've got, obviously, that we've seen before anybody knows the facts.
They're playing politics, Giles. It's nothing about the law. It's nothing about who's right and who's wrong. It's playing politics. That's what they're doing, and we should stay out of the politics side of it and look at the facts of it, and the facts haven't come to light yet. And he will be judged on those few seconds, and she would have been judged on those few seconds if she was still around. Her partner will be judged on those few seconds, because I'm sure she will be in court as well, because she's committed a crime, and that crime has resulted in the death of her own loved partner. So, it's always emotional, but the fact is, it goes down to a couple of seconds. That's all it is. I've stood on a door all night long. Been fantastic. It's never been a problem. And then suddenly, within a few seconds, it's off. And you have to make, and I'm sure your guests there and most of the people around have never had to make that decision, especially when they're armed, especially when there's someone in front of you with some type of weapon. And as I said, a car's a weapon. It's a weapon.
Peter, thanks. I've got some more calls. I've got
awful choice there. So. Okay.
Thanks for your call in, though, Peter. Good to hear from you. 952784000. Going to take a quick break and then back for the last 5 minutes of Viewpoint.
This is Talk Radio Europe.
Viewpoint on Talk Radio Europe with
Giles Brown.
As you might think, we've got quite a few comments coming in into the last 4 minutes or so of Viewpoint. So, this one coming in. Hi, she was clearly turning and glanced him with a bumper. Then he walked away, calling her a bitch. Meanwhile, an apple is an apple, a pear is a pear, and murder is murder. Claudia, thank you. Meanwhile, where to start? There are so many video angles showing she categorically did not drive into the agent. She also said, "That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you," as captured on his own phone. So it's depending what J.D. Vance said. I want the name of the state trooper, though that's already out there. His name is Jonathan Ross, not the. No, honestly, it is.
Oh wow,
Jonathan
what a
coincidence!
Yeah,
letting Peter should be. Oh no, sorry, state trooper who let Peter go. Okay, thank you. What was her crime? So you just take a gun out to show it off. What was the crime? 4 minutes or so to go with this morning's Viewpoint. Just a quick look at the poll. This is an interesting conversation about what could happen in future UK general elections. However big the call for changing the way the votes are counted, nothing will change as there's no consensus to a way forward. Let's talk about voting might get more people involved, at least talking about voting get more. Richard misses the point about how many voted for Labour, as the real situation is how many people never used their vote. 33% of those voted equates to about 25% of the population voting for this massive Labour government. And the poll at the moment is still standing. Do you think there's going to be regime change in Iran? 72% think there will be, and 28% think there won't be at the moment. So much to go back over with that one then. But it is, I think it's the immediate pile-on and people saying domestic terrorists. People are dropping labels in because the woman who was killed was then immediately called a domestic terrorist. And
Christine Nome, who she came out
was
saying, she was coming out saying that this person belonged to God knows what radical group is internal terrorism.
Lesbianpoets.com.
Incredible, absolutely incredible.
But this is, again, as I said, I talked over Peter, and apologies, Peter, but this is that both sides have now gone boom without a time for reflection. Perhaps in previous thing we would be saying, let's discuss settle, let's have a cold hard look at the facts. And Peter's got a point with the fact that the angles and whatever, because you can make a case in any, as you can do, and this is facile, but as with the VIR thing. And if you bring a narrative to that story, if we bring a narrative to any story that we're seeing media clips in, then we're not seeing the nuance. Andres, you're nodding sagely.
No, I'm just thinking that the American culture with regards to guns are more permissive than they would be here in Europe, for instance. Where the police think twice before they use
the Spanish police agent to draw a gun.
No, in America happens all the time. Yeah. So there is more acceptance of that kind of violence that we have here. But still, can I please be shocked about what I saw and what I think it was an execution? And that's where I'm sitting at. It's not emotional or anything. I think it's quite objective of what you see in the images. Maybe the court proves me wrong. It wouldn't be the first time. Maybe I'm wrong, but what I could see is what's there, and there were other ways of solving that particular problem with that woman other than killing her.
Right, into the last minute of this morning's Viewpoint. Thank you very much for all your comments in this morning. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 7 days? Because last time we talked about Venezuela and we didn't even mention it in the previous 2 hours. So who knows where we might be in 7 days' time?
I mean, it's interesting to see for the Venezuela side when Donald Trump said that, the greatest oil companies in the world, but they're not. I mean, Saudi Aramco is biggest and Sinopec is bigger, and then the Chinese. So ExxonMobil comes in probably third or fourth. How he said that, they're going to come in. So he has this grandstanding sort of table of all these oil execs. And they say, no, you can't invest in that. I mean, Venezuelan oil is like sludge. I mean, it costs about $55 a barrel to actually just take out of the ground.
Yeah.
So you imagine what the oil price has to be for any of these guys to make money.
What do you think people should be looking out for in the next 7 days, Richard? Because we're just about to end the show. So what can you see happening in the next 7 days?
I can see the demonstrations dying down in Iran. Hopefully, common sense will prevail. But then with Trump, you hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Andreas, any thoughts?
I hope that the evil regime of Iran falls down in the next 7 days and we can celebrate it next week.
Right then, okay, on that controversial note, thanks to both my panelists. Richard, great to see you.
Hey, thank you.
Andreas, as always, leaving with a laugh.
Thank you.
And I'll be back tomorrow with Let's Talk. Thank you for very much for the comments. Stephen Ritson's up next.
By invited studio guests and callers do not constitute an opinion endorsed in any way by Talk Radio Europe.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit tre.radio.